It was a cold morning, like most December days in Thermopolis. I sat on the veranda of my house wrapped in an old blanket, watching the first rays of sunlight slip across the frost-covered roofs of the neighboring houses. The coffee in the mug had long since gone cold, but I kept clutching it in my hands as if trying to hold on to the warmth that had left my life with Ruth. My name is Jeremiah Holloway, and I'll be 74 in 3 months. I have worked at the Soul of Thermopolis radio station for most of my life, hosting the Midnight Blues program. For 4 decades, I spoke into a microphone, telling stories, sharing music, and connecting thousands of strangers with the invisible threads of my voice. I sipped my cold coffee and grumbled. Ruth would never let me drink that stuff. Jeremiah, she'd say, if you want to ruin your voice, there are better ways. And she'd be right, as always. It's been 5 years since she left. A heart attack had taken her suddenly, without warning, like someone had just turned off the lights. The doctors said she didn't suffer. But is that any consolation? 47 years together, and then the silence of the airwaves. I live alone in the house, except for the ghosts of memories and occasional visits from the children. Ruth and I have three. Parrish is the eldest, 45, daughter Octavia, 42, and youngest son Ellington, 38. The names of jazz compositions, the names of musicians. Ruth indulged my fascination when we chose names. Now everyone has their own families, their own worries, and Grandpa Jeremiah is somewhere on the periphery of their lives. After Ruth died, I continued to run my program for 3 more years. I went on the air at midnight, spoke with my velvet voice, as listeners called it, put on my favorite compositions, told stories from the lives of great musicians. But 2 years ago he retired. He said he was tired. In fact, he saw no point in continuing without the only listener whose opinion really mattered. Ruth always waited for me to return, even if the program ended at 3 in the morning. The station gave me a lavish send-off, gave me a statuette from some music award, said I was a Thermopolis legend, that my voice was the voice of a generation. Beautiful words. But when I got home and closed the door behind me, the house greeted me with the same emptiness. Sometimes I'm invited as a guest to special editions, station anniversaries, music festivals, city celebrations. I don't refuse. These rare outings are the only thing that truly revitalizes me. My phone rang, interrupting my musings. Parrish's number popped up on the screen. My oldest son called me about once a month, and almost always those calls ended with a request for money. "Hey, Dad, how are you doing?" His voice sounded exaggeratedly cheerful, a sure sign that the conversation would eventually come down to money. Same old, son. What you got?" Well, I had to get my car repaired. A serious breakdown. And Jasmine's having problems at work. She might be made redundant. Jasmine's his wife. Third, he didn't introduce us until 6 months after the wedding. Ruth was no longer with us by then. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, knowing what was coming next. "Look, Dad, could you lend us some money? We'll faithfully pay it all back as soon as Jasmine resolves the job situation," I said. I stopped listening, nodding absently into the phone. Lend. That's a funny word. In the last 5 years, I'd loaned Parrish probably the value of a small house. Octavia called less often, but she wasn't shy about asking. Only Ellington kept to himself, calling occasionally just to see how I was doing. But he lived the farthest away 3 states away, and I saw him maybe once every 2 years. "Okay, Parrish," I interrupted his monologue. "I'll wire you the money today." "You're the best, Dad." His voice was noticeably more animated. "I'll come by this weekend, I promise. I'll come see you." A promise seldom kept. The last time I'd seen Parrish was 4 months ago, when he needed the deeds to the house for some insurance story. He spent 15 minutes with me, had a cup of coffee, and left. After Ruth died, the children came to see me even less often. It was as if her passing had finally severed the threads that bound our family together. Maybe those threads didn't exist anymore, though, and Ruth was the only one who created the illusion of family unity by organizing holidays and Sunday dinners. I rose from my chair, feeling my knees crunch. Age was making itself felt. Entering the house, I opened my laptop and transferred the requested amount of money to Parrish. Then I headed to the kitchen to brew a fresh pot of coffee. From the kitchen window, I could see the neighboring house where Beverly Ames lived. Beverly had moved to our street 3 years ago, shortly after her husband died. There was only a small front garden separating our houses. She was the kind of woman who aged beautifully, elegant gray hair, lively eyes, easy gait. In her 70s, she looked 60, went to the pool regularly, and belonged to a book club. We met by chance when she came up to me in a supermarket and told me she'd been listening to my program all her life. Turns out Beverly was a longtime fan of mine, though I never met her at station events or the autograph sessions that management occasionally arranged. I was too shy, she admitted later. Your voice always sounded so intimate, as if you were speaking to me personally. I was afraid to shatter that illusion. From then on, we saw each other almost every day. At first, it was just neighborly conversations over the fence. Then, joint trips to the store. Later, I began to invite her for a cup of tea, and she treated me to homemade pastries. Gradually, the tea parties turned into dinners together, and the conversations stretched into the late hours of the night. I didn't plan to fall in love at 73, and neither did she, probably. But one evening, as we sat on the veranda of her house listening to a John Coltrane record, her hand found mine, and we just sat like that, holding hands and looking up at the starry sky. In that moment, I felt my heart, which I had thought petrified after Ruth's death, was able to beat faster again. But I didn't tell my children about it, not because of shame or fear of judgment. They just weren't interested in my life, unless it involved money or favors I could do for them. Octavia sometimes left her 3 children with me for the weekend, without asking if I had plans. The parish used my house as a staging post between business trips or family squabbles. To them, I was a useful function, not a person with my own feelings and desires. Beverly understood this. She had a similar relationship with her own daughter, who lived in Europe and called occasionally. That's life, Jeremiah, she said. Children grow up and fly away from the nest. We have to find our way without them. And we did. Secretly, we began planning a trip together for Christmas. Beverly had always dreamed of seeing the Bahamas, and I promised Ruthie that someday we would visit those islands. A promise I never got around to keeping. Now I had a second chance, albeit with another woman. When I heard a knock on the door, I was distracted from my thoughts. Beverly stood on the doorstep with a basket of fresh buns. I thought you might have missed breakfast, she smiled as she walked into the house. She smelled of lavender and vanilla, scents I now associated with comfort and warmth. You're saving me, I let her inside. Just got off the phone with Parrish, asked for money again. And you said yes. It wasn't a question. The usual, I said with a wave of my hands. I know he won't pay me back. I know I shouldn't indulge. But I can't say no. Beverly shook her head, putting the scones on a plate. You're too kind to them, Jeremiah. They're taking advantage of it. I knew she was right, but I didn't want to admit it. Ruth also said I spoil the children too much, and especially Parrish. But how do you say no to your own son? Even if he's long gone from being the boy who once proudly introduced me to his friends as the coolest dad in Thermopolis. Everything all set for our trip? Beverly changed the subject. Only 2 weeks left. The tickets are bought. The hotel is booked, I confirmed. We just need to book an airport shuttle. We sat down at the table, enjoying fresh pastries and coffee. Outside the window, a light snow began to fall, the first of the season. Beverly talked about a book she'd recently read. I shared memories of my first radio broadcasts. Time flowed differently with her, not slow and dragging like the lonely evenings after Ruth's death, but easy and unnoticeable. Will you ever tell them? She asked suddenly. About us. About the trip. I looked at her, gray hair arranged in a simple but elegant style, warm brown eyes, wrinkles in the corners of her eyes that grew deeper when she smiled. I'll tell her just before I leave, I decided. Let it be a surprise to them. Beverly touched my arm. I think it's time for you to start living for yourself, Jeremiah. You've earned it. Maybe she was right. Maybe it's time to show the kids that their old man father isn't just an ATM or a free hotel, that I have my own life, my own plans and desires, and that at 73 it's still possible to fall in love and start over. I looked out the window at the falling snow and felt a warmth spill into my chest. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future, not just existing day by day, clinging to the shards of the past. The phone rang at exactly 9 in the morning. I was just having breakfast, looking at the morning paper. It was Octavia calling. My daughter always called at the same time, as if on a schedule she had made in her impeccably organized day planner. "Good morning, Daddy." Her voice sounded cheerful, but with that special note that came out when she needed something from me. "How are you today?" "Not bad, honey. Eating breakfast, reading the paper." "Are you taking your meds? Watching your blood pressure?" This ritual was repeated every time I called. Octavia asked questions about my health, but never waited for answers. She was the kind of person who asked questions only to fulfill a social obligation, not out of real interest. "Everything is under control," I replied succinctly. "Great," she paused. "Listen, Dad, here's the thing. Brock got a promotion, and we're having a company party next Friday. Very important for his career. Brock is Octavia's husband, works for a big pharmaceutical company. Tall, with perfect posture and an insincere smile, he has always struck me as a man who calculates how much time he benefits from spending with his wife's in-laws. Congratulations, Brock." I took a bite of my toast. "What does this have to do with me?" "You see," Octavia's voice became even more honeyed, "there's going to be a lot of important people, and Brock mentioned that his father-in-law is the famous Jeremiah Holloway from the radio. Now everyone's waiting for you to show up. Here it is. There it is again. Octavia, you know I don't like these events. Daddy, please. All you have to do is show up, say hi to a couple or three people, tell a few funny stories from your career. It's so important to Brock." I sighed. This wasn't the first time Octavia or Parrish had used my name to promote their own interests, and then demanded my presence to maintain the legend. Parrish had once even organized an exclusive performance by a radio legend at his company without my consent, and then confronted me with the fact. Ellington was the only one who never tried to monetize my name, although that may be why his career as a psychologist was slower than his siblings. "Okay, Octavia," I gave in. "What time and where?" She dictated the details enthusiastically, and then, as if remembering something important, she added, "And Dad, put on your good suit, okay? And maybe tell the story about the time you interviewed B.B. King. People love it. The circus monkey transformation is complete," I thought. But out loud I said, "Sure, honey. Anything else?" "Yes." She perked up. "Would you mind babysitting on Saturday? Brock and I have theater tickets and the babysitter canceled. It's part of the ritual too. Never just like that. Always with an extra request." "Okay," I agreed, even though I'd planned to spend Saturday with Beverly. "You're the best, Dad. The kids are going to love it." I doubted, I thought. The older twins, Lonnie and Lauren, who were 14 each, usually locked themselves in the guest room with their tablets and ignored my existence. And the youngest 10-year-old Melody treated me like a living museum piece, occasionally asking questions like, "Is it true there was no internet when you were little?" After Octavia's call, I put the paper away. My appetite was gone. I looked at the picture of Ruth standing on the sideboard. It was taken in our favorite park, about 20 years ago. Her eyes were laughing and the wind was ruffling her hair. "What would you do, Ruth?" I asked quietly. "You always knew how to put children in their place without hurting them." There was no answer, of course. I finished my cooled coffee and went into the living room. There, in an old dresser, were albums of family photos. I rarely looked through them. It was too painful to see Ruth's smiling face, the happy moments that would never be repeated. But today, something was pulling me back to the past. I opened the album, and memories flooded back to me. Here's Parrish, just a toddler, sitting on my shoulders during the parade. Octavia in her prom dress. Ellington getting his first psychology degree. Family barbecues, picnics, Christmas. When did my kids turn into these strangers who use me whenever it suits them? At what point did I stop being a father to them and become just a resource, financial or social? Perhaps it happened gradually. Perhaps it was my own fault. I was always working hard, often missing important events in their lives because of late-night airings. Ruth was the one who held the family together, created traditions, made sure everyone felt loved. My phone rang again. Parrish's number. "Hey, Dad!" His voice sounded even more excited than usual. "That's a bad sign." "Hello, Parrish." I closed the album. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You wouldn't believe my good fortune." He ignored my dryness. "Remember Dexter King from Huntley High? The guy who now owns a chain of car dealerships?" "That's right." Parrish was clearly relieved that I remembered. Well, he's opening a new dealership here in Thermopolis. Big event, press, local celebrities. I could see where he was going with this. E? And he found out you're my father. Said he grew up listening to your program, that you were the voice of his childhood and everything. Anyway, he's inviting you to be the guest of honor at the opening. Can you believe it? And you, of course, have already said yes for me. A brief pause confirmed my hunch. Well, I thought it would be nice for you. They're your fans, Dad. And you have no other motive? I couldn't contain my sarcasm. Well, if you come, Dexter promised to give me a good deal on a new model and maybe offer me a spot in sales. I told you Jasmine was having trouble at work, remember? This is it. The real reason. When is this event? Next Wednesday, 7 p.m. I already have plans for Wednesday night, Parrish. Sure. What plans? There was an undercurrent of disbelief in his voice, as if I, a 73-year-old retiree, couldn't possibly have any plans. Personal, I cut him off. Dad, please. This is very important to me. For Jasmine and me. I sighed. A week ago, I'd promised Beverly I'd take her to a jazz band concert at the local cultural center. Tickets had already been purchased. But like so many times before, I'll probably cancel my plans for the kids. I'll think about it, I finally said. Thanks, Dad. I knew I could count on you, exclaimed Parrish. By the way, did you send the money yet? I just need to pay for my car repairs today. I sent it yesterday. You're the best. All right, I gotta run. I got a meeting. I'll call you later. And he hung up without even asking how I was doing. I put the phone down on the table and rubbed my temples. The headache that had begun to form during my conversation with Octavia was now throbbing with renewed vigor. I needed some fresh air. I threw on my coat and stepped out into the garden. The snow that had fallen the day before had already melted, leaving the ground damp. The air was cool and fresh, smelling of pine and wet leaves. I walked slowly through the garden that Ruth had once lovingly tended. After she died, I'd tried to keep it tidy, but I'd missed her talent. Nevertheless, her favorite roses and lilies were still blooming here in the spring. It's a nice morning for a walk. Beverly's voice caught me off guard. She was standing by the fence separating our plots, garden shears in hand. She was wearing a warm jacket and a wool hat. Last preparations before winter, she explained, pointing to the bushes. I'm pruning the roses. Why are you so glum? I came closer. The children had called, as usual, with their requests. And you said yes, not a question, but a statement. Almost. Parrish wants me to come to the car dealership opening, Wednesday. Beverly raised her eyebrows. Wednesday? But we have a concert. I know. I lowered my eyes guiltily. I said I'd think about it. She put the scissors aside and looked at me carefully. Jeremiah, you have to learn to say no. It's easier said than done. They are my children. Children who treat you like a free resource. Her voice became harsher. They're adults, Jeremiah. They should respect your time and your wishes. Ruth wouldn't approve of that attitude. At the mention of Ruth, I flinched. Beverly was right. Ruth had never let the children manipulate us. She had loved them unconditionally, but with clear boundaries. After she died, those boundaries gradually blurred until they disappeared completely. I don't know how to change that, I admitted. It's too late to start raising them again. Beverly opened the wicket gate and came toward me. It's never too late to start respecting yourself, Jeremiah. They're not just using your money and your time, they're using your love against you. She took my hand, and her touch was warm even through the gloves. Come, I'll make you some tea. Then we can discuss our trip. I found a wonderful restaurant on the beach that serves the best seafood in the Bahamas. The warmth of her hand and the thought of the journey ahead dispelled my frown a little. We walked through the garden to her house, a cozy one-story cottage with a wide veranda. Inside, it smelled of cinnamon and apples. Beverly had baked a cake that morning. While she made tea, I sat at her kitchen table, watching her move about the kitchen with confidence and grace. Beverly had that special elegance that only comes with age and self-acceptance. She didn't try to look younger, but somehow she looked livelier than many young women. Here, she placed a cup of tea in front of me and sat down across from me. Now tell me about all these important events they're trying to drag you to. I told her about Octavia's request and Parrish's offer. Beverly listened without interrupting, but I could see her expression change from disbelief to annoyance and finally to determination. "This has to stop, Jeremiah," she said when I was done. "You're not a tool to advance their careers. You deserve to be treated better." "I know," I sighed. "But part of me still hopes that if I do what I can for them, they'll go back to being the family they were under Ruth." "That's not going to happen," Beverly said softly. "It isn't. You give them everything they want without asking for anything in return. Why would they want to change?" She was right, but the truth was painful. All my life, I've defined myself through my work and my family. A radio host and a father. That's what I was. Now that radio is a thing of the past and the kids are estranged, what have I become? Beverly, as if reading my thoughts, covered my hand with hers. "You're so much more than just their father, Jeremiah. You're a smart, talented, caring man. A man I want to spend Christmas in the Bahamas with," she smiled. "By the way, I bought a new swimsuit just for the trip. It's red. I hope it's not too scandalous for a woman my age." I couldn't help but smile back. "I'm sure you'll look amazing." Her eyes sparkled, and in that moment I felt that maybe there is life after 70. A life full of new possibilities and feelings that I thought had long since faded. After tea, we moved to the living room where Beverly pulled out a folder of printouts about the Bahamas, hotels, tours, restaurants. She had researched everything thoroughly and made a rough plan for our stay. We sat side by side on the couch, flipping through the pages and discussing what we wanted to see and try. "I've never been to the Bahamas," I admitted. I'd always promised Ruth that I'd take her there, but I kept putting it off. First because of my job, then because the kids were in college and I needed money for their education. "I understand," Beverly nodded. "Sona, my Frank kept putting off our trip to Europe too. And then it was too late. He got sick and we never went." A shadow of sadness flickered in her eyes, but she quickly pulled herself together. "That's why I think you should do what makes you happy while you can. Life is too short to put happiness on hold." She was right. In my 73, I finally began to realize that the only way to be truly happy is to live in the present, not the past or the future. And my present now included Beverly. "Will you go to the concert with me on Wednesday?" I asked suddenly. She smiled. "What about the opening of the car show?" "Parrish will somehow survive my absence," I said firmly. "It's time he learned to solve his own problems." Beverly leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "I'd be happy to go with you," she said. "And maybe we should tell your kids about us before Christmas. Give them time to get used to the idea that their father is in love again." In love. A word I didn't expect to hear or feel at my age. But it was the right one. I was truly in love with this amazing woman who had come into my life when I no longer had any hope for new feelings. "Maybe you're right," I squeezed her hand. "But for now, let's just enjoy our secret. It's only 2 weeks until the trip. And then when we get back, I promise we'll tell them everything." Beverly nodded and rested her head on my shoulder. We sat like that, looking at guidebooks about the Bahamas and making plans for our first Christmas together. Wednesday's concert turned out to be exactly what I needed. A small jazz ensemble played classic compositions. Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk. The music took me back in time to when I first started my radio program, when I first put those tunes on the air. Beverly sat next to me, occasionally squeezing my hand in time with particularly beautiful passages. That night I dreamed of Ruth. She was smiling and saying something I couldn't hear. When I awoke, I felt not sadness, but a strange peace. Parrish called the next day. I could tell from his voice that he was upset. "You didn't come," he said instead of greeting me. "Hello, Parrish," I answered calmly. "Yes, I had other plans, like I said." Dexter was very disappointed. He had prepared a speech about how your program had affected his childhood. "I'm sorry about that." I did feel a slight pang of guilt, but not for Dexter, but for letting my son down. Though to be fair, he'd put himself in that position by not getting my consent beforehand. "You could have at least warned me," he sounded reproachful. I looked like a complete idiot. "I said I'd think about it, not that I was definitely coming," I reminded him. "Where I went last night was my business." There was a pause. I could almost physically feel Parrish choosing the words to express his displeasure without crossing the line. He was always careful about that. Never the kind of overt rudeness that could justify denial of financial aid. "Okay," he finally said with feigned ease. It doesn't matter anymore. I have good news. What good news? I was worried. We've decided to come to your house for Christmas, Parrish announced excitedly. The whole family. The whole family? I repeated, feeling my insides grow cold. Yes, me, Jasmine, the kids, Octavia and hers, Ellington and Nate, and their adopted daughter Jasmine wants to bring her mom and sister. All in all, it's going to be 15 people, no more. 15 people. In my house, which only has 3 bedrooms. For Christmas, which I was planning to spend with Beverly in the Bahamas. Parrish, I don't think. Dad, it's going to be amazing, he interrupted me. The first real family Christmas since Mom left. You know, I've been thinking, we don't spend enough time together. You're getting older, and who knows how many more of these holidays we'll have. Manipulation, pure manipulation. And if I hadn't spent the last few weeks talking to Beverly about boundaries and self-respect, I probably would have given up. I would have canceled the trip, spent a ton of money getting the house ready to host 15 people, cooked, cleaned, and then watched them enjoy themselves, barely noticing my presence. But something inside me clicked. The image of the white sand of Bahamian beaches, Beverly in her new red swimsuit, freedom from commitment for at least a couple weeks, it was all too precious to pass up. It's a wonderful idea, Parrish, I said slowly. But I'm afraid I won't be home for Christmas. I'm going on vacation. There was such silence that I could hear him breathing through the tube. Vacation? He finally squeezed out. What vacation? Where to? To the Bahamas, I answered, feeling strangely gratified by his confusion. Alone? The details don't matter, Parrish. The important thing is that I won't be home. But where are we all going? His voice sounded as if I'd told him the earth was flat. You can still come to my house, I suggested with sudden boldness. There's plenty of room. It'll just be a little cramped. I'll leave you the keys. You can be the host. Me? Parrish obviously didn't see that coming. But Dad, you're always organizing Christmas dinner, decorating the house. It's not going to be the same. I'm sure you can do just as well, I said firmly. After all, you're a grown man, Parrish. 45 is old enough to organize a family party. I could almost hear his brain working, trying to find a way to change my mind. Parrish has always been manipulative. Since he was a kid, he's been able to get his way. I don't think that's a good idea, he said finally. We'd better book a hotel. As you wish, I shrugged, though he couldn't see it. But the offer still stands. The house will be empty. You can use it if you want. When are you leaving? He asked after a pause. December 23rd. And when are you coming back? January 2nd. Another pause. I could almost see him doing the calculations in his mind, the cost of a hotel for 15 people for Christmas vacation versus staying at my house for free. Well, maybe it's not such a bad idea, he finally said. Everyone loves your house, and the kids would love to see where their daddy grew up. I could barely contain a chuckle. My house suddenly became attractive when Parrish realized how much money he could save. Oh, great. I'll leave the keys with my neighbor, Beverly. Beverly? He sounded surprised. You're getting close to her? I decided not to go into that. She's a good neighbor. She keeps an eye on the house when I'm away. Okay, he'd clearly lost interest in Beverly. So it's settled. We'll be there on the 23rd, just as you're leaving. Maybe we'll at least see each other for a couple hours. We'll see, I answered uncertainly, knowing that I would organize my departure so as to avoid that meeting. And Dad, his voice suddenly became uncertain. Could you leave, some money for groceries and stuff? Christmas dinner for 15 people isn't cheap. And there it is, the real purpose of all this. I'll organize that too, I said, feeling the determination growing inside. Don't worry. You're the best, Dad. The enthusiasm was back in his voice. It's going to be an unforgettable Christmas. I had no doubt about that. After talking to Parrish, I sat in my chair, overwhelmed by my own courage. I had really done it. For the first time in years, I had put my desires above the expectations of the children. The feeling was both frightening and intoxicating. I walked over to the window. Beverly's house was lit up, and I could see her silhouette through the curtains. She was probably cooking dinner or reading a book. I needed to tell her about the conversation with Parrish. I threw on my coat and headed toward her house. Beverly opened the door after the first knock, as if she'd been waiting for me. "I can tell by the look on your face that something interesting has happened," she said as she let me inside. I told her about Parrish's call and my decision not to cancel the trip. "I'm proud of you." She took my hands in hers. "But I admit I'm a little surprised. Did you really agree to leave them the house?" "Yes," I nodded. "And that gives me an idea." "What's that?" She was wary. "I think I can give them a special reception." Beverly looked at me carefully. "Jeremiah Holloway, what are you up to?" "Nothing illegal or dangerous," I assured her. "Just a little lesson. They want to use my house as a free hotel? Let them. But the conditions won't be exactly what they expect." I shared my idea with her, and Beverly looked shocked at first, then laughed. "It's a bit cruel," she said, "but I think it's deserved. Just promise me no one will get hurt." "I promise," I raised my hand. "Not physically, and the mental trauma. Well, maybe their egos will suffer a little." Beverly shook her head, but I could see she liked the idea. "Well, I'm with you, and if you need my help—" "You will," I squeezed her hand. "You're the key to this plan." We spent the evening discussing the details of my little plot. I was feeling more and more excited by the minute. For the first time in a long time, I felt something akin to excitement, like the good old days when I was planning special editions of my radio program, preparing surprises for the listeners. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head and a clear plan of action. The first thing I did was to call my old friend Morton, who worked at the radio station as an engineer. "Mort, I need your help," I said after greetings. "Anything for you, old boy," he said. "What is it this time?" I explained my idea and Mort laughed. "Bloody genius," he exclaimed. "Of course I'll help. When do we start?" The sooner the better. I could feel the anticipation building inside me. We have less than 3 weeks until Christmas. After I talked to Mort, I sat down at the computer and started making a list of everything that needed to be done. The list was impressive, but each item brought a smile to my face. A call from Octavia caught me in the middle of it. "Daddy," Parrish said, "you're going away for Christmas? Is that true?" She didn't even say hello. "Hello, Octavia." I leaned back in my chair. "Yes, it's true. I'm taking a vacation." "But it's Christmas, a family holiday." She sounded both shocked and indignant. "Exactly," I agreed. "And you can spend it as a family at my house." Parrish said he'd take care of the arrangements. "Parrish?" she snorted. "He can't even organize his own garage." "No, if we're all moving in together, I should do the organizing." I smiled. Typical Octavia, always having to be in charge. "Whatever you say, dear. You and Parrish will sort it out between yourselves. I'll leave the house keys and money for expenses." "Where exactly are you going?" She sounded a little suspicious. "The Bahamas." "Alone? Does it matter?" Pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "Daddy, did you have someone?" I didn't expect Octavia to be so direct. "What if I did?" "Oh my God," she exclaimed. "Are you seeing someone? At your age?" She sounded as incredulous as if I had announced that I was going to Mars. "At my age, people are still living, Octavia," I said with mild irritation. "And yes, I'm dating a wonderful woman. We're going on vacation together." "And who is she?" my daughter asked demandingly. "Do we know her?" "No." I decided not to reveal that it was Beverly. "I'll introduce you when the time comes." "Dad, are you sure this is, uh, wise?" Her voice became condescending. "At your age, you have to be careful. There are women who are after—" "For what, Octavia?" I interrupted her. "My millions? Or my athletic body of a 73-year-old man?" "You know what I mean," she sounded annoyed. "Just be careful." "I appreciate your concern," I said, trying not to sound sarcastic. "But I'm still capable of making decisions about my own life." "Good," she said, clearly deciding to change tactics. "Anyway, since you're ready to go, you need to leave instructions for the house, where things are, how the heating works, all that stuff." "Sure," I agreed. "I'll get everything ready." "And Dad," she hesitated, "you'll leave the fridge full, won't you? And maybe some cash for emergencies?" "That's it. Money is the main concern." "Don't worry, Octavia. Everything will be organized in the best possible way." After talking to my daughter, I realized that the news of my departure had already spread among the children. Soon Ellington called as well, the only one who really seemed concerned about me and not about how the vacation would affect their plans. "Are you sure it's safe, Dad?" he asked. "The flight? The change of climate. At your age, it's a strain on the body." "I consulted a doctor," I lied. "He said I was in great shape for my age. Besides, the Bahamas isn't the Amazon jungle. They have all the medical care you need. If you're sure." He still sounded concerned. "Just, take care of yourself, okay?" "I promise," I smiled. Ellington had always been the most empathetic of my kids. "How are you? How are Nate and little Ava?" We talked about his family, how their adopted daughter was growing up, Nate's job at the hospital. Ellington never once mentioned Christmas at my house or money. When we finished talking, I felt a prick of regret. Perhaps Ellington didn't deserve what I had planned. But on the other hand, he was part of a family that had taken me for granted for too long. That evening, I met Morton at his favorite bar. Despite his 76, Mort was energetic and enthusiastic. "I brought something for you," he said, handing me a small box. "It's the latest development. Programmed timers for anything connected to electricity, including the thermostat." I opened the box and saw several small devices. "How does it work?" Mort explained how it worked. I could program the heating to turn off for certain hours and also control other electrical appliances. "Perfect," I was impressed. "But isn't it dangerous?" "Absolutely safe," Mort assured me. "Just not very comfortable," he grinned. "One more thing." He pulled another device out of his bag, a small cylinder with a microphone. "This is for your audio message. Top of the line. We'll record it in the studio so the quality is perfect. Just like the good old days." I could feel the excitement building inside me. The plan was taking shape. "Thank you, Mort," I raised my glass. "To old friendship and a little revenge." "Revenge," he clinked his glass with mine. "Small but well-deserved." We spent the evening discussing the details of the plan, and every minute I felt more and more confident. It was the right thing to do. It was time to show the kids that their old man father wasn't just a free hotel and ATM. When I got home, I found a message on my answering machine from Parrish. His voice sounded tense. "Dad, it's me. Listen, about Christmas. Are you really sure you want to go? The kids have been looking forward to seeing you, especially Brianna. She's learning your favorite Christmas song on the piano. Think about it again, okay? Call me back." Manipulation. Again. Brianna, his youngest daughter, didn't even know what my favorite song was. She barely remembered my name, considering she saw me once a year, if not less. I didn't bother returning the call. Instead, I sat down at my desk and started making a list of everything I needed to prepare for my family's arrival. But not things that would make their stay comfortable, but things that would teach them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I felt a slight prick of conscience. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should have just talked to them directly, explained my feelings. But then I remembered all the times they'd used me. All the missed birthdays, all the calls that ended up asking for money, all the times they'd mentioned my name to get some kind of benefit for themselves. No, talking wouldn't help. They needed a lesson they would feel on their own skin. I went back to the list smiling. Christmas this year would indeed be unforgettable, for all of us. With a week to go before I left, I set my plan in motion. Every morning I woke up with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. It was like preparing for a special edition of my radio program. Meticulous detail, calibrated timeline, attention to detail. My first order of business was the heating. Morton helped me install programmable thermostats that could be set to run on a schedule. I programmed them so that the heat would turn off at 6 in the evening and not turn on until 9 in the morning. Nights in Thermopolis in December were cold, not deadly, but enough to create noticeable discomfort. "Are you sure the pipes won't freeze?" Morton asked, watching me work. "The temperature won't drop below 10 degrees, I answered. "Cold enough to be unpleasant, but not cold enough for real damage." Morton shook his head, but I could see the approval in his eyes. He knew my kids, had seen how they'd treated me over the past few years. "I'll leave the thermostat in the master bedroom working fine," I added. "Let them fight for the right to sleep there." The next item on my list was the refrigerator. I gradually stopped buying perishables, leaving only canned goods and foods with a long shelf life. In the freezer, I left a few packs of frozen vegetables and a package of chicken thighs. That would be enough for one modest dinner, no more. Isn't that a little cruel? Beverly asked when I told her about my preparations. It's Christmas after all. The supermarket's 5 minutes away, I shrugged. No one's going to starve. It's just that they'll have to take care of their own food, not expect it to be handed to them on a plate. Beverly nodded thoughtfully. You know, I'm beginning to understand why you were such a successful radio host. You have a talent for drama, I laughed. Years on the air had taught me that a good show needed a climax, and I had a climax ready. Morton and I recorded a special audio message in the station studio. I used my radio voice, deeper, more expressive than my usual tone. The message was recorded on a high-quality digital recorder that was to be turned on at exactly midnight on Christmas Day through speakers placed throughout the house. Just like old times, Morton said when we finished recording. You haven't lost your touch, Jeremiah. I listened to the tape. My voice sounded perfect warm, but with a distinct chill that I usually save for the more dramatic moments on the air. Good evening, Holloway family. This is Jeremiah, your father, father-in-law, grandfather, and father-in-law speaking. I hope you are comfortably settled in my home, or perhaps not so comfortable. You've probably already noticed some peculiarities of your stay here. Perhaps you're a little cold. Perhaps you've discovered that the refrigerator isn't as full as expected. It's not an accident. This is my little Christmas present to you. A lesson in what it feels like to be used and taken for granted. The message lasted 5 minutes. I poured into it all the feelings that had built up over years of neglect. Not rudely, not viciously, but with a dignity and firmness that I hoped would make them think. But the audio message was only part of the plan. I also contacted my former colleague, Rudy Fleming, who now hosted a morning show on our radio station. Rudy was young, energetic, and loved provocative topics. Jerem, what a surprise, and he exclaimed when I called him. To what do I owe this honor? I have an idea for your show, I said. An exclusive, you might say. I'm all ears, he sounded genuinely interested. As you know, Christmas is coming, I began, and my family is gathering in my house. For the first time in years. Sounds wonderful. Not really, I paused for dramatic effect. You see, I won't be there. I'm going to the Bahamas. What? Rudy was clearly intrigued. You're leaving your family for Christmas? More like giving them a chance to spend time without me, I grinned. And I thought it might be interesting to make a little story out of it for your show. Celebrity radio host Jeremiah Holloway shocks his family by going to the Bahamas for Christmas, leaving his home behind for a big family gathering. Rudy whistled. That's, unexpected. But why do you want me to talk about it on the air? Let's just say I want my family to feel special. I chose my words carefully. Some of my fans might want to wish them a Merry Christmas. Rudy wasn't a fool. He knew right away what I was getting at. Do you want fans to come to your house in the middle of a family holiday? Exactly, I confirmed. Nothing extreme, just a little, inconvenience. Rudy laughed. Jerem, you old fox. Who'd have thought it? All right, I'll do it. This morning airs December 25th. I'll announce a big family gathering at the legendary Jeremiah Holloway's place and hint that fans can stop by to congratulate the family. Great, I was pleased. And Rudy, let's keep our conversation between us. Of course, he assured me. It'll be our little secret. The final touch to my plan was a letter, or rather the note I'd left in the master bedroom, under my pillow. Short, terse, but saying all it needed to say. If you don't like the accommodations, you can always leave for a hotel, as I've done all these years when my house was used as a staging post and my hospitality was taken for granted. Merry Christmas, Dad. I folded the note and hid it so that it would not be found immediately, but when the major surprises had already shown themselves. The day before I left, I called Beverly to go over the final details. Are you sure you want to go through with this? She asked. It's not too late to cancel. I'm sure. I was firm in my decision. This isn't just revenge, Beverly. It's a lesson. Maybe after this, they'll appreciate what they have. Or hate you, she said softly. There's a risk, I admitted. But I'm willing to take it. Worst case scenario, I'll still have you. There was a flicker of tenderness in her eyes. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Even if your kids declare you a crazy old man. Especially if they declare me a crazy old man, I smiled. then I'll definitely need an ally. December 23rd came on a clear, frosty day. I got up early, checked all my preparations again. The thermostats were on schedule. The refrigerator was strategically emptied. The sound system was programmed. I packed my suitcase, packing everything I needed for a 2-week stay on a tropical island. Beverly stopped by to help with the final preparations. "What time does your family fly in?" she asked, helping me make the bed in the guest bedroom. "Parrish said they'd be here around 4, I answered. "Our plane leaves at 2. We'll be gone before they arrive." Beverly nodded, but I could see she was a little nervous. "What if they arrive early?" "They won't," I was sure. "Parrish is always late. Besides, I'm leaving the keys with you. Even if they get here early, they'll have to wait for you to get home from work." Beverly worked part-time at the local library organizing reading programs for children. She had the morning shift that day, so she had to be home by 4 o'clock. "Okay," she looked more confident. "I'll give them the keys and tell them you asked not to be disturbed." "Perfect," I kissed her cheek. "And don't forget to tell them about my instructions around the house." Beverly laughed. "Oh, I won't forget. Jeremiah asked me to tell you that the thermostat sometimes malfunctions, but not to worry, just dress warm." We were done with our preparations by noon. The cab was due at 1 o'clock to take us to the airport. I walked around the house one last time, making sure everything was ready. In the living room was a small artificial Christmas tree I'd set up for looks. No decorations, no lights, just a symbol of the holiday the family would have to create on their own. On the mantelpiece, I'd left an envelope of money enough to buy groceries for Christmas dinner, but not enough for something extravagant, and certainly a lot less than they expected. At 1 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The cab arrived right on schedule. I picked up my suitcase, took another look around the house I wouldn't see until New Year's Eve, and walked out, closing the door behind me. Beverly was waiting for me in front of her house, her suitcase ready. "Ready for an adventure?" she asked with a smile. "More than ready," I took her hand. "May this be the best Christmas of our lives." We got into a cab and headed to the airport, leaving behind the house that would soon become the stage for a little family drama. The flight to Miami, where we had a layover in the Bahamas, went smoothly. We caught our flight with plenty of time to spare, and were already settled into our airplane seats when my phone vibrated. A message from Parrish. "Dad, we've landed. We'll be at your house in half an hour. Hopefully we'll still catch you." I showed the message to Beverly. She smiled. "Right on schedule, or rather, slightly late." I sent a short reply. "Already on the plane. Beverly from across the street has the keys. Merry Christmas." The phone vibrated again almost instantly. "What? You're really leaving? I thought you were kidding." I turned the phone off. The plane was preparing for departure, and the flight attendant was already announcing the need to turn off all electronic devices. But even if she hadn't, I still wouldn't have responded. Let them get used to the idea that their old man-father was actually capable of making his own decisions. Beverly squeezed my hand as the airplane began to accelerate down the runway. "Are you okay?" she asked. "More than okay," I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I felt really free. The plane lifted off the ground, and I leaned back in my seat, imagining what was happening in Thermopolis right now. Parrish is probably furious. Octavia is starting to plan how to reorganize everything under her control. Ellington is probably worried about me, and the rest of us are just perplexed as to what's going on. When we landed in Miami, I turned on my phone and found a slew of missed calls and messages. From Parrish, from Octavia, even from Ellington. I went through them quickly, not going into detail. The bottom line was clear. They were shocked, outraged, and confused by my departure. The last message was from Beverly, sent minutes before our flight. "They're here. Handed over the keys. Parrish looks like he's seen a ghost. Octavia demands an explanation. I said you left all the necessary instructions at the house. See you in Miami." I showed the message to Beverly, and we both laughed. The plan had begun to take effect. While waiting for my next flight, I received a call from Octavia. Deciding it was time to at least hear their reaction, I answered. "Daddy!" Her voice sounded outraged. "What is this all about? Did you really go to the Bahamas? And what about the heating? It's freezing." "Hello, Octavia." I tried to speak calmly. "Yes, I'm on my way to the Bahamas. Like I said a week ago. But we were hoping you'd change your mind. It's Christmas. Exactly, I said. Christmas, a time for the family to get together. Enjoy it. Without you? There was something resembling resentment in her voice. Yes, I was adamant. Without me. For the first time in years, I've decided to have the party the way I want it, not the way you want it. That's, it's selfish, she blurted out. Maybe, I agreed, but it's no more selfish than showing up at my house with 15 relatives without consulting them first. We wanted to surprise you, she tried to justify herself. And you did, I couldn't contain my sarcasm. And now I'm surprising you. Enjoy the holiday, Octavia. In the envelope on the mantelpiece is money for groceries. It should be enough for a modest dinner. Modest? She was clearly shocked. There are 15 of us. Then you'll have to chip in, I remained adamant. The supermarket is having a big Christmas special right now. I heard her take a deep breath, trying to contain her anger. And what about the heating? It's cold in here, Dad. The thermostat malfunctions sometimes, I repeated the phrase we'd rehearsed with Beverly. Just put on some warm clothes. There's extra blankets in the closet. It's just, she stammered, unable to find the words. I gotta go, honey, I interrupted her. They're boarding our flight. Merry Christmas. I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and satisfaction. Beverly looked at me with concern. Is everything okay? She asked. Yes, I nodded. They were beginning to realize that this wasn't a joke, that I'd really gone away and left them to figure it out on their own. How are they taking it? So far, distrust and resentment, I shrugged. But it's a start. Let's wait until they spend the night in a cold house, find an empty refrigerator, and hear my midnight message. Beverly shook her head, but I could see understanding in her eyes. They deserve a lesson, she said, but I hope it doesn't destroy your family completely. If it's ruined because they have to spend Christmas without everything on a platter, then it never existed, I said. A real family will endure more than that. We boarded the plane to the Bahamas. I turned off my phone, deciding not to check my messages until we got there. Let them get used to the idea that they could no longer reach me on short notice. Let them learn to cope on their own. As the plane took off, I looked out the porthole at the receding lights of Miami and felt a weight fall from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was doing what I wanted to do, not what was expected of me. And that feeling of freedom was intoxicating. Dawn begins slowly in the Bahamas, as if the sun itself is in no hurry to disturb the peace of this place. I woke up early, a habit developed over years of morning airs that you can't get rid of even on vacation. Stepping out onto the balcony of our hotel room, I breathed in the salty air and looked out at the ocean that stretched to the horizon. The water was all shades of turquoise, from soft blue near the shore to deep blue in the distance. Gulls circled above the surface, occasionally diving for prey. Beverly was still asleep, so I didn't wake her. Instead, I sat down in the wicker chair on the balcony and turned on the phone I'd kept off since I'd arrived. It was early Christmas morning in Thermopolis. As expected, there was a string of missed calls and messages on the phone. From Parrish, 16 calls and 23 messages. From Octavia, 12 calls and 19 messages. Even from Ellington, who wasn't usually intrusive, 5 calls and 7 messages. I started going through the messages from Parrish, starting with the earliest ones. Dad, is this some kind of joke? It's freezing in here. The thermostat isn't working. We're all freezing. There's hardly anything in the refrigerator. How are we supposed to feed 15 people? Answer the phone. It's an emergency. As I read, the messages became more and more desperate, and by late afternoon, downright angry. Did you set this up on purpose? The kids are freezing. Jasmine is freaking out. We found your note. Is this really your idea of revenge? Very mature. Do you have any idea how much a hotel costs for 15 people on Christmas night? We can't just leave. The last messages were sent around midnight. What the hell is that damn tape turned on all over the house? Have you completely lost your mind? The kids are in tears. Everyone is in shock. I hope you're happy. Messages from Octavia were in a similar tone, though more restrained in form but no less accusatory in content. Father, this is unacceptable. The heating doesn't work. There's hardly any food in the house. The money you left was barely enough for the most basic food. We had to chip in for Christmas dinner. Brock is furious. We could have spent the holidays at our house instead of freezing here. Your audio message was cruel. Do you have any idea what that looks like from the outside? Ellington, as always, was more subdued. Dad, we're having heating problems here. Do you know how to fix it? There seems to be almost no food here. We went to the store, but the money you left was only enough for the bare necessities. Everyone's upset. I'm trying to smooth things over, but it's hard. Your message. I understand how you feel, Dad. I really do. But the way you chose to express them, I hope you're okay. Call me when you can. There was another message from Rudy Fleming. Mission accomplished, old boy. Mentioned the family gathering on the air. Judging by the reaction in the chat room, several fans are already on their way to your house with Christmas presents and autograph requests. Merry Christmas, your faithful Rudy. I couldn't hold back a smile. The plan was working even better than I'd expected. I felt a little sorry for Ellington. He'd always been the most empathetic of my kids. But he was part of a system that had been using me for years, and a lesson was needed for everyone. At that moment, Beverly came out of the room, wrapped in a light robe. Good morning, she said, leaning over to kiss me. You're up early. Old habit, I smiled, checking messages from Thermopolis. Beverly sat down on the edge of a nearby chair. How are our conspirators doing? Not good by the looks of it. I showed her the phone. Cold, hungry, and, thanks to Rudy, full of uninvited guests. She looked at a few messages and frowned. Maybe that's enough? They seem to have learned their lesson by now. I wondered. Perhaps she was right. But something inside me resisted the idea of just giving up and apologizing. For too long, I'd been the one who was always giving in, always going along to get along, always sacrificing my own interests for others. Let's just enjoy the day, I decided. It's Christmas, our first Christmas together. They're adults. They'll manage somehow. Beverly nodded, though I could see she wasn't entirely convinced. Okay, but maybe at least send a text saying you're okay. They are your kids, after all. Okay, I agreed and quickly typed a short message addressed to all three of them. Merry Christmas, I'm fine. Enjoying my vacation. After sending the message, I turned my phone off. Today I wanted to fully immerse myself in new experiences without the distractions of the past. We spent the day exploring the island. Sandy beaches with crystal clear water where you could see colorful fish just by standing knee-deep in the water. Palm groves creating a nice shade on a hot afternoon. Little stores with local souvenirs and cafes with delicious seafood. Beverly was delighted with everything. Her eyes sparkled as she examined the shells on the beach, and her laughter when a wave unexpectedly wet her new sandals was infectious. I caught myself thinking that I hadn't felt this happy and carefree since Ruth had been alive. By late afternoon, we were back at the hotel, tired but satisfied. There was a bottle of champagne waiting for us in our room, a Christmas present from the management. We sat on the balcony, sipping the cool drink and watching the sun sink into the ocean, coloring the sky and water with golden and pink tones. You don't have any regrets? Beverly suddenly asked. Regret what? That we're here and not in Thermopolis with your family, I thought for a moment. No, I answered honestly. My only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. I didn't set boundaries. I didn't show them that I was a human being with my own desires and feelings, not just a convenient resource. Beverly covered my hand with hers. I understand, but they're still your children, and maybe some of the blame lies with you too. You've let them use you for years. I know, I sighed. I guess it was easier for me to give than to demand respect. After Ruth died, it was a way to stay connected to them. Still, Beverly continued softly, maybe the method you chose for the lesson is a little too dramatic? I grinned. A professional deformity. My years in radio had taught me that sometimes you have to create real drama to get a message across. She smiled, but her eyes remained serious. I just don't want you to lose them over it. I don't either, I admitted, but sometimes you have to take a risk to make a difference. At that moment, my phone, which I had turned on to send a Christmas greeting, rang. Parrish's number. I think you should answer it, Beverly said, standing up. I'm going to take a shower. She left me alone on the balcony with the ringing phone. I hesitated, not knowing if I was ready to hear my son's anger, but in the end I decided I had to answer it. It was part of the process. Hi, Parrish, I said, picking up the phone. Dad. His voice sounded strange, a mixture of anger and relief. Finally, I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been busy, I answered calmly. I've been sightseeing. Sightseeing? He hesitated. Do you have any idea what's going on here? Your house is a nightmare. What exactly happened? I asked innocently, even though I knew the answer. What happened? His voice rose an octave. Let's start with the fact that it's bloody cold in here. The heating goes off every night at 6 and doesn't come on until 9 in the morning. The kids sleep in jackets and hats. That sounds unpleasant. I tried to sound neutral. There should be extra blankets in the closet. Extra? He hesitated again. Dad, there are 15 of us. Your blankets are barely enough for half of us. The stores should be having Christmas specials on home textiles right now, I suggested. I could almost hear him gritting his teeth. That's not all. There's almost nothing in the fridge. The money you left was barely enough for the most modest dinner. We had to order delivery from the restaurant at our own expense. That's a shame, I said. It must have been expensive. That's very funny, Dad, he said, no humor in his voice. And then there's that midnight tape of yours. Do you have any idea how much that scared the kids? Your voice suddenly came out of every speaker in the house. I'm sorry about that, I said. And I meant it. I didn't mean to scare the grandkids. I hope no one was seriously frightened. Seriously? His voice got even higher. Lily woke up screaming. She thought it was a ghost. Lily was Parrish's youngest daughter. She was only 6. It made me feel a prick of guilt. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. I hadn't counted on little kids hearing the message. It was for adults. Yeah, we get it, his voice grew colder. Your little lesson about us using you. Very mature, Dad. Very mature. Isn't it? I asked you straight up. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not to ask for money or help, but just to talk? There was a pause. I could almost hear him trying to remember such a call and not being able to. I have my own life, Dad, he finally said. Work, family, worries. I have mine too, I replied. And yet I always made time for you when you needed something. Is that what this is about? His voice grew colder. You're feeling used and you've decided to get revenge for Christmas? Give us all a little hell. Not a little hell, Parrish, but a little lesson, I tried to say calmly. A lesson in how it feels to have your needs and desires ignored. When you're just a convenient resource, not a person. Again the pause, longer this time. And then there are these people, he finally continued. Some strangers who keep ringing the doorbell, asking for you, wanting autographs, pictures. They brought gifts for the family of the legendary Jeremiah Holloway. How did they even know we were here? The radio, I answered simply. Rudy had mentioned on his morning show that my family was gathered in full force at my house for Christmas. I guess some of my old fans decided to stop by. Did you set this up on purpose? The disbelief in his voice was mixed with realization. Maybe, I didn't deny it. It's funny, isn't it? You and Octavia have never been shy about using my name for your own gain. And now you've experienced what it's like to be Jeremiah Holloway, when people come to you not for your own sake, but for what you can give. It's, he stammered, clearly unable to find the words. Cruel? I suggested. Maybe, but no more cruel than treating your own father like an ATM machine in a free hotel for years. I heard him take a deep breath, as if trying to contain his anger. You know what, Dad? Enjoy your vacation. We'll manage here somehow, and when you get back, we need to have a serious talk. We will, I agreed. And Parrish, Merry Christmas. I really do. He hung up without answering. I sat on the balcony, looking up at the stars, which seemed especially bright out here, away from the city lights. My conversation with Parrish had left me with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I was glad that my plan had worked, and that they were beginning to understand what it was like to be in my shoes. On the other, the sting of guilt for scaring little Lily was unsettling. Beverly came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel with wet hair. How was the conversation? She asked, sitting down next to me. It's hard to say, I sighed. They're definitely not happy, but I think they're starting to get the point. That's good, she put her hand on mine. But remember, the goal isn't to punish them. It's to change the dynamic of your relationship. I know, I squeezed her hand. It's just sometimes it's hard to separate the one from the other. We sat in silence, watching the full moon rise over the ocean, reflecting in a silvery path in the dark water. The night breeze brought smells of salt, exotic flowers, and distant campfires. Let's not think about it anymore tonight, Beverly suggested. It's our first Christmas together. Let's just enjoy the moment. She was right. I turned off my phone and put it in my pocket. You're absolutely right, I said, getting up. Let's get dressed and go to the holiday dinner. I hear the hotel restaurant has a special menu tonight. We got dressed and went down to the restaurant, which was located on an outdoor terrace overlooking the ocean. The tables were decorated with candles and tropical flowers, and live music was playing. A local band was playing calypso Christmas songs. The mix of traditional and exotic created an amazing atmosphere. We ordered seafood, the freshest shrimp, lobster, tropical fish grilled with local spices. The food was served with chilled white wine, which perfectly complemented the flavor of the seafood. After dinner, we walked along the beach holding hands. The sand still held the warmth of the afternoon sun, and the ocean whispered something of its own, timeless and soothing. We were the only ones on that stretch of beach, as if this whole beautiful world belonged to just the two of us. Aren't you sorry, I asked Beverly, stopping and turning to her. Regret what? About getting involved with an old man who causes drama with his kids. She laughed and hugged me. Not for a second. You're not just an old man, Jeremiah. You're a man who finally decided to stand up for himself, and I'm proud of you for that. I kissed her, feeling everything else, the kids, their resentments, my guilt, recede before this moment of pure happiness. When we got back to the room, I decided to check my phone after all. There was another message, this time from Ellington. Dad, I listened to your message several times, and you know what? You're right. We did take you for granted. I'm not speaking for Parrish or Octavia, just me. I'm sorry. I should have been more careful. I hope you're having a good time in the Bahamas. You deserve that vacation. Love, Ellington. That message warmed my heart. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe at least one of my children really understood what I was trying to convey with my eccentric act. I showed the message to Beverly, and she smiled. See, she said, your plan is working. At least Ellington understood. Yeah, I nodded. One of three, it was a start. We went to bed to the sound of the ocean through the open window. I felt strangely calm. No matter what happened when I got back to Thermopolis, I knew I had done the right thing. For the first time in a long time, I had put my desires and feelings first, and that feeling of freedom was worth any consequences. Our plane landed in Thermopolis on January 2nd, around 3 in the afternoon. Winter had set in. The city was covered with a thin layer of snow. The sky was covered with gray clouds. After the bright sunshine and warm air of the Bahamas, the landscape seemed especially bleak. Beverly squeezed my hand as we waited for a cab at the airport exit. Are you ready to meet me? She asked, looking at me with concern. As ready as I can be, I smiled at her. I'd have to face them sooner or later anyway. During the 2 weeks of vacation, I received numerous messages from the kids. Angry from Parrish, resentful from Octavia, conciliatory from Ellington. I answered briefly and matter-of-factly, without going into long explanations. Everything that needed to be said, I was going to say in person. The cab pulled up in front of my house about half an hour later. All the curtains were drawn, but the lights were on, which meant someone from the family was still there. I expected that. Parrish had written that they would stay until I got back to have a serious talk. Do you want me to come with you? Beverly asked as we unloaded the suitcases from the trunk. Yes, I nodded. I think now would be a good time for them to meet you. We went to the door, and I pulled out my keys, but before I could put them in the lock, the door swung open. Parrish was standing there, his face tense. Finally, he said instead of greeting me, we've been waiting for you. Hello, Parrish, I tried to say calmly. This is Beverly Ames, I looked at her and smiled. My partner. Parrish looked over at Beverly, and his eyes widened in surprise. A roommate? He squeezed out. You're dating a neighbor? Yes, I confirmed. For months now. He stepped back silently, letting us into the house. Octavia and Ellington were waiting for us in the living room. The children and spouses had evidently left, for the house was quiet. "Father," Octavia rose from the couch. Her tone was cold and formal. "I'm glad you're back safely." Ellington merely nodded and smiled weakly. He looked tired, as if he'd spent the past 2 weeks trying to reconcile warring parties. "Have a seat," I said, pointing to the chairs. "I understand we have a serious conversation planned." "Yes," Parrish crossed his arms across his chest. "Very serious." I helped Beverly out of her coat, and we sat down next to each other on the couch. The children were seated across from each other, like some kind of tribunal. I felt the irritation rising inside. Even now, after everything that had happened, they felt entitled to judge me. "Now," Parrish began, "do you want to explain what it was? The whole, with the heating, the empty fridge, the message and the fans? What's there to explain?" I shrugged. I thought the message was clear enough. I was tired of being used, tired of being a convenient resource instead of a person with my own wants and needs. "And that's why you decided to ruin our Christmas?" Octavia's voice shook with restrained rage. "The children were freezing. We had to buy extra heaters. And what about all those people who kept ringing the doorbell, asking for you, wanting autographs?" Parrish added. "It was humiliating." "Humiliating?" I raised an eyebrow. "And when you used my name to get a discount on a car or a sales position, that wasn't humiliating to me?" Parrish opened his mouth but couldn't come up with an answer. "Or when you, Octavia, asked me to come to Brock's company party to tell a couple of funny career stories? Wasn't that being used?" Octavia pressed her lips into a thin line. "This is different," she finally said. "We're family." "Exactly," I nodded. "We are a family, and a family should respect each other, support each other, not to be used as a free hotel or an ATM. Ellington, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "Dad, I understand why you did it. I really do. We really took you for granted. But the way you chose to do it, doesn't it seem excessive to you?" I wondered. Ellington always knew how to ask the right questions. "Perhaps," I admitted. "But I've been trying to talk to you for years. Hinted that I didn't like being just a source of money or a name to elevate your status. You wouldn't listen. Sometimes it takes a shock for people to finally hear." "And you think you've gotten your way?" Parrish asked bitterly. "That now we'll suddenly start treating you differently?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But it doesn't matter anymore." "What does it mean?" Octavia frowned. I took Beverly's hand and looked at my children. "It means I've decided to make some changes in my life. First, Beverly and I are planning to live together." "What?" Parrish looked stunned. "You're moving in with her?" "Not exactly," I shook my head. "We're going to sell both our houses and buy something new. Maybe an apartment closer to the center. Something that will be just ours with no history or old memories." There was a silence. My children looked over at each other, clearly shocked. "Sell the house?" Octavia looked as if I'd announced the end of the world. "But this is our family home. This is where we grew up." "Yes," I nodded. "But you all have your own homes now. This is my home, and I have the right to do what I want with it." But we had hoped," Parrish began, then hesitated. "Hope for what?" I asked. "That it would be yours when I died? Or that you could continue to use it as a free hotel when it suited you?" Parrish looked away without answering. "There's something else," I continued. "I'm going back on the radio." There was less reaction to this news, but still the surprise was evident on their faces. "I've been offered a new program," I explained, "just once a week in prime time. It will be called Midnight Reflections, about life, love, and how it's never too late to start over." "Are you serious?" Parrish looked incredulous. "At your age?" "At my age," I looked at him firmly. 73 isn't the end of life, Parrish, and I intend to live my remaining years fully and honorably." Beverly squeezed my hand, silently supporting me. "One more thing." I took a deep breath. "I'm revising my will." Now that got their full attention. Even Ellington straightened in his chair. "A significant portion of my savings will be donated to charity," I continued, "a fund to support aspiring radio hosts and a scholarship program for students from low-income families." "You're disinheriting us?" Octavia couldn't believe her ears. "Not completely," I shook my head. "You'll still get some of it, but not all of it." and definitely not this house, since it will no longer be in my possession. Parrish jumped to his feet, his face flushed. You can't do that. I can. I remained calm. And I do. Octavia rose too, her eyes glistening with tears, but not, I suspected, from grief, but from anger and frustration. You've changed, Father, she said coldly, and not for the better. No, Octavia, I shook my head. I haven't changed. I've just finally stopped letting you use me. Ellington was still sitting there, watching this scene with an unreadable expression on his face. And you support that too? Parrish turned to him. You agree with this betrayal? Ellington rose slowly. It's not a betrayal, Parrish, he said quietly. Papa has a right to his own life. We've all grown up. We all have to learn to respect his choices. I was touched by Ellington's support, even though I could see that he was having a hard time standing up to his older brother and sister. Perfect, Parrish grabbed his coat. Just fine. Enjoy your new life, Dad. Without us. He headed for the door, but stopped and turned around. And don't call me when you need help. When you're old and sick and your new, friend will get tired of you. Parrish, exclaimed Ellington. This is too much. But Parrish was on his way out, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame fell from the shelf. Octavia shook her head. You'll regret this, Father, she said, and followed, though she closed the door more gently. It was just Beverly and I and Ellington. He came over to us and sat down next to us. I'm sorry about them, Dad, he said quietly. They're used to a certain dynamic, and it's hard for them to accept that things are changing. I know, I sighed. I didn't expect them to be thrilled, but I was hoping for a little more understanding. Give them time. Ellington put a hand on my shoulder. Maybe they'll still come around. Maybe. I wasn't sure about that, but I appreciated my son's optimism. What about you, Ellington? What do you think about all this? He thought for a moment. I think that you're doing the right thing. You deserve to be happy, Dad. And if this, he nodded toward Beverly, makes you happy, I fully support you. Thank you. I was touched by his words. It means a lot to me. Beverly, who had been silent until then, giving us a chance to sort out family matters, finally spoke. It's nice to meet you, Ellington, she said with a warm smile. Your father has told me a lot about you. Likewise, he smiled back. And I'm glad to see him so lively. I haven't seen him like this in a long time. Not since Mom left, I said quietly. Yes, Ellington nodded. Since about then. We sat for a while talking about my plans, my trip to the Bahamas, my new radio program. Ellington listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at our vacation stories. It was the first time in many years that I felt like I was truly connecting with one of my children. When he finally got ready to leave, he hugged me tighter than usual. I'm going to miss this house, he admitted, but I understand your decision. You'll always be welcome in our new home, I assured him. You, Nate, and little Ava. Thanks, Dad, he smiled. I'll call more often, I promise. After he left, Beverly and I were alone in the quiet house. I looked around the living room where I'd spent most of my life. Thousands of memories had been made here, happy and sad, meaningful and ordinary. Here I had lived with Ruth, raised my children, grieved when I was alone. Sad? Beverly asked, noticing my mood. A little, I admitted, but also liberating, like closing a chapter and opening a new one. She hugged me, resting her head on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, she said. Not everyone has the courage to start over at our age. I smiled and kissed the top of her head. Doesn't seem like such a feat with you. We stood like that for a while, just enjoying the silence in each other's presence. Outside the window, snow began to fall. Large flakes slowly descended to the ground, covering everything with a white blanket. A new year, new beginnings. I didn't know how my relationship with Parrish and Octavia would play out. Perhaps in time they would come to terms with my decisions. Perhaps not. But for the first time in years, it didn't seem like the most important thing in my life. I no longer defined myself solely through the role of father or grandfather. I was Jeremiah Holloway, a man with his own dreams, desires, and the right to happiness. And that sense of freedom was worth any price. What do you think of the apartment overlooking the park? I asked Beverly. The one we saw in the ads before we left? The one with the big balcony? She perked up. I think it's perfect. Enough room for the two of us, but no extra rooms to clean. Sichinum, and close to the radio station, I added. I could walk to work. And from the library too, she smiled. We could meet for lunch at that little cafe on the corner. That sounds wonderful, I squeezed her hand. Let's watch it next week, shall we? Beverly nodded and her eyes lit up with anticipation. A new house for a new beginning. I circled the living room once more, mentally saying goodbye to every corner, every piece of memorabilia. Part of me would always be connected to this place, but the other part, the part that had been asleep for a long time and was just now waking up, was rushing forward to new possibilities, new experiences, new life. Come on, I took Beverly's hand. It's cold out here. We'll spend the night at your place, and tomorrow we'll start unpacking. A new life can't wait. We left the house, leaving the lights on in the empty rooms. The snow crunched under our feet as we crossed the road to Beverly's house. I didn't look back. The past was behind me, and the future, bright, uncharted, and full of possibilities, was just beginning. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly free.